and coastal biodiversity. This forum just wrapped up last week, so we were working quite hard to produce the report of it in a short time frame, and we have done so, and we'll be not only informing you where you can find the report, but also telling you about some of the report outcomes, which can hopefully facilitate not only preparations for COP15, but also for the meeting beginning this week in Nairobi. We will also be recording this webinar, so those who were unable to follow live can review it later on their own time, or those of you that are here can watch it again later if you're so inspired and wish to be inspired again. So to kick us off, we will have some opening remarks from the chair of SBSTA, Mr. Hesikio Benitez Diaz. So please, Hesikio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Dear colleagues and distinguished delegates, good morning here in Mexico City, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I offer you a warm welcome to this information webinar to provide an overview of the outcomes of the online discussion forum on conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity in preparation for the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, which wrapped up, as Joe mentioned, just last week. With the ocean being a major reservoir of the world's biodiversity, the issue of marine and coastal biodiversity is critical to the work under the Convention and under SBSTA. Thankfully, ocean issues have been gaining the increased attention that they deserve with major developments across the global ocean landscape. In particular, during the United Nations Decade on Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the World Trade Organization, the International Seabed Authority, and deliberations on a new plastic treaty, on a new international instrument for marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. And just in a few weeks from now, the world will gather in Lisbon for the UN Ocean Conference to embolden global commitments for a healthy and productive ocean. Under the CBD, parties and stakeholders are working to develop the new post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, beginning another round of negotiations this week in Nairobi. The post-2020 framework will be submitted for adoption at the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the CBD, also called CBD COP15. This increasing global focus on the ocean means that the post-2020 framework will play a key role in facilitating improved conservation and sustainable use for marine and coastal biodiversity. Unfortunately, the significant time spent working on the post-2020 framework, and rightfully so, has also limited our time to be able to fully address ocean critical issues. At the 24th meeting of SBSTA, we face the unfortunate situation of not having sufficient time to fully discuss marine issues. As such, SBSTA requests the Executive Secretary to advance discussions on this issue prior to the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, to facilitate focused deliberations on these issues at COP15. In response to this request, and in consultations with SBSTA Bureau, we convened an online discussion forum to help advance discussions on issues that weren't fully able to address at SBSTA. Despite of not being a formal negotiation, because it was no mandate to negotiate, the forum had very important task of providing outputs that can help accelerate deliberations on these issues at COP15. It facilitated a discussion on key elements that should be included in the COP15 decision on this issue, what consideration parties must address when discussing these elements, and also key areas of different views. Despite the physical distance from one another, the forum participants held a full discussion with 160 posts across all the 5 threads of the document, and we were pleased to see not only strong engagement, but also the constructive nature of inputs, which provided not only clear views, but rationales for approaches to the COP15 decision on this issue. In light of the central importance of oceans in the post-2020 framework, I urge parties and stakeholders to refer to the report of the forum to assist deliberations and input to the post-2020 negotiations of goals and targets convening this week in Nairobi, in particular on the thread number 3 that you will see. My sincere thanks to the CBD Secretariat, the co-facilitators of the forum, Mary-May Musungale from Seychelles and Janos Henniken from Germany, and to all participants at the online forum for the great work done in helping us to fulfill the mandate of SBSTTA Recommendation 24.9 by advancing discussions on these key issues when we were unable to do so at the physical meeting of SBSTTA. The report of the online forum is available both at the forum page and as information document at the Open-Ended Working Group 4 webpage. I now invite CBD Secretariat to provide you an overview of the background, context, format, and outputs of the online discussion forum. Thank you very much and good luck during the following days. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you so much, Ezequiel, for that introduction. Before I move ahead, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see my slides in full screen? It's okay? Okay, good, good. So, as Ezequiel noted, I will give an overview of the background and context and objectives and outcomes of these discussions. It's important to note that this webinar is mainly to inform participants and inform you all on the outcomes of this. So we're not going to be discussing or changing any of the outcomes, of course, as the report is already finished, but it's mainly to raise awareness and put the information out there for the benefit of various colleagues, including those who have gathered in Nairobi this week to advance discussions in the post-2020 framework. So, I should also note before I go ahead that our co-facilitators, Janos Henneke and Mary-May Musungale, unfortunately were unable to join. Janos had other conflicts at this time, and Mary-May actually is in Nairobi and had a last-minute important coordination meeting to attend. So they also send their best regards, but were unable to join us for this webinar. Now, as Ezequiel noted, the basis for this webinar, or sorry, for the forum, was the unresolved discussions in Geneva at the 24th meeting of SBSTTA. So as you can see there, lots of people huddling around, figuring out what to do in the midst of a very limited time, and the importance, and still the importance of the issue of marine and coastal biodiversity. So there was quite a bit of difficult decisions that had to be made in Geneva, which meant, unfortunately, that we did not have enough time to fully discuss the two main marine issues and draft recommendations that were presented to SBSTTA. The first of, those two draft recommendations were on ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, or EBSAs, and I will give a brief update at the end of this presentation about what will happen with that. And the other was on the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, and that was the issue that this forum last week addressed. So we had one contact group session, at least in the physical meeting. We also need to keep in mind that there was a virtual meeting of SBSTTA 24 last year, but at the physical meeting in March, there was one contact group session, which was only able to consider annexes 1 to 6 and annexes 7 to 12, and the draft recommendations were not able to be addressed in the time frame that we had. So during the plenary session for the consideration of CRP2 on conservation and sustainable use, it was agreed that there was no time for full consideration of this issue and of the draft recommendations that were presented. So, Mr. Hasicchio, the chair, welcomed text submissions, basically welcomed parties and observers to provide their proposals for revised or new text submissions for compilation, which we made available immediately during the Geneva meeting, and was provided as an information document to the Geneva meeting, and also was referred to in the main recommendation. So, parties and observers provided their text submissions for this paper, which at the time was a CRP, and they also did so for the other CRP on EBSAs. We in the Secretariat compiled these into information documents, and we basically collated these paragraph by paragraph. So for each paragraph underneath, you will see each respective party and observer's proposed text for this paragraph, and you can see and track changes where the changes were to be included. Now, in terms of the recommendation itself, the main the recommendations, or the draft recommendations with all the substantive issues, were actually put in an annex because we were unable to wrap up deliberations on that. We weren't able to have full discussion on that. So the main recommendations basically address the issue of the unresolved discussions, and note that we were unable to resolve to have a full discussion on this issue, and requested intercessional work to advance these discussions in advance of COP15. And as I said, the substantive, the originally intended recommendations were placed in an annex, which will still therefore part of the recommendation, although not having the same operative implications as they would have. So on the basis of this, and responding to this request from SBSTA, the Secretariat organized an online discussion forum on the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, with the intention of providing a platform for an exchange of views on the recommended elements that should be addressed in the CBD COP15 decision on this issue, building on the annex to SBSTA recommendation 24.9. So despite the fact that SBSTA wasn't able to have a full discussion on the draft recommendations as originally intended, COP15 will still take a decision on this matter. So these issues will be deliberated at COP15, and the unresolved discussions at SBSTA 15, as well as the outcomes of this forum, are intended and will provide input to those deliberations at COP15. Now, briefly, I just want to review the documents that this forum had before it. So, of course, the main focus of the deliberations was on the annex of recommendation 24.9. So again, the intention was that we wanted to advance deliberations on these issues, which will be the basis for the COP decision, and that is basically the annex to recommendation 24.9 is where all of those issues are located, and where all of the sort of things that we have to debate are contained. We had, of course, the compilation of proposals, which I mentioned earlier, and on the basis of that, we in the Secretariat produced a synthesis of these proposals. So the compilation is a much longer document. It has all of the proposed text that was provided by parties and observers. But to provide a bit more of an easy reference, and perhaps to have a bit of an overarching view of what these proposals say, we reviewed the actual text proposals and pulled out the main elements of those proposed revisions. So similar to the compilation, this is done paragraph by paragraph. And as you can see there, we synthesized for each of these paragraphs the elements of the proposed revisions that came from the compilation, and any proposals for new paragraphs or a significant modification to the paragraphs. So that provides a bit more of an easy reference point and a synthesized version of the elements that we received in the proposals. Now, all of those documents were hosted on the meeting webpage, which those of you who have attended a CBD meeting before should be familiar with. But we also had the main online discussion forum webpage. So actually, the entirety, well, almost the entirety of this forum was held on this page, and it's not a traditional meeting format. We don't have actual discussions in face-to-face or even through the computer, so to speak, but rather it's a online web page to post views. So basically all registered participants could post their views and others could respond to their views. And it was an online discussion in the sense of having discussions by posts rather than by speaking. So we had an opening webinar on June 8th from 8 to 10 a.m. Just to kick off the webinar. We had the actual kick off the forum, sorry. We had the online discussion forum for 4 days, so on 9 and 10 and then 13 and 14 June. We did close the forum over the weekend because we were unable to moderate over the weekend. And then the closing webinar on 15 June, where we provided a brief summary of the discussion and guidance on the next steps. Now, in terms of participants, the Secretariat welcomed and requested nominations of participants from parties and relevant organizations. We sought to ensure geographic, regional, and gender balance in the selection of the participants, and participants were selected under the guidance of the Substa Bureau. And we ended up having 55 participants from 36 countries and 19 organizations. And as you can see, we had a relatively good balance among the different regions. Unfortunately, we only had one from Central and Eastern Europe, but we only received one nomination from that region. So that's the best we could do there. But with the other regions, we had relatively good geographical balance. And I also wish to note that in terms of the access to the forum and who was participating in the discussion, only the registered selected participants were able to participate in the opening and closing webinar and were able to post in the online forum. But the online forum is viewable by any. It's viewable to the public. It still is. You can go to the webpage and look at the posts. And the opening webinar and closing webinar, the recordings of those webinars, I believe, are posted on their CBD YouTube page. So first, we can look at the way that the forum was organized, and basically, we had different threads. So in the language of CBD online discussion forums, they're organized according to threads or conversations, let's say. Now, what we did with this specific issue is we organized threads according to paragraphs of the annex to Substa recommendation 24.9. So basically, the text and the language that we needed to advance discussions on, we organized those into threads, with the first thread focusing on cooperation, collaboration, and linkages with competent organizations and relevant initiatives. These are the preambular paragraphs. For those of you that are familiar with the language of these intergovernmental processes. And those are, and you see there also bracketed text, as these are coming from the unresolved discussions at Substa 24. Thread 2 was focused on marine and coastal biodiversity in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and in particular implications for the programs of work under the convention. So this focused on preambular paragraph 5 and paragraphs 1 and 2, of which there are also proposed alternative versions there. and I, of course, I understand people can't read this fast, but don't worry, you shouldn't be reading all of this unless you want to go have a look at the actual document itself. Thread number 3 focused on implementing the post-2020 global biodiversity framework in marine and coastal areas. And this one, as Hesikio noted, is probably the most relevant for the discussions that are going to be kicking off this week in Nairobi. And this focused on paragraphs 3 through 6, which talks about different aspects of substantive areas of work and collaboration and issues that will be important, most likely, to the development and implementation of the post-2020 framework. Thread 4 was focused on plastics, marine spatial planning, and deep sea mining. There's no particular reason that those issues were grouped together other than the fact that they are individual sort of thematic issues and occur in proximity to each other in terms of the ordering of the paragraphs. So paragraph 7, 8, and 9. Thread number 5 was focused on mainstreaming capacity building partnerships and synergies. So this is paragraphs 10 through 15, and basically basically provides updates and acknowledgement of areas of collaboration between the CBD Secretariat, and various other organizations and entities, and requests enhanced cooperation with other areas, and synergies and engagements with other processes. So also very important to the work of the convention and the post-2020 framework. Now, we had relatively good and robust conversation in these posts. We had about 160 posts in total, and you can see there how the posts are split up. Not surprisingly, the thread with the most posts was the one focused on the post-2020 framework. Apologies for my voice. It's a bit of a cold and a 1-year-old that doesn't want to sleep at night. So we had a relatively good balance between the different posts, but also we saw that there was a lot of focus on the post-2020 framework. So now I wish to provide a summary of the discussions in each thread. So first, just to provide some general points, and general points that emerged from the posts. We didn't have a section on general points. We wanted to keep the discussions focused in particular on the pertinent issues, to try to advance discussions on the specific, on the issues that are addressed in the text. But inevitably, points did emerge that had a broader relevance for the entire decision. So first, we had posts highlighting the importance of focusing on the impact of a COP decision. So what do we actually achieve with a COP decision? And in particular, highlighting the importance of a COP decision supporting implementation at various levels and helping to strengthen alignments and synergies with other processes and organization. There was a lot of discussion on the importance of a rights-based approach and recognizing the rights of rights holders, both in terms of conservation and sustainable use, as well as in deliberations under the CBD and other relevant ocean processes. There was much discussion on the importance of traditional knowledge and the value of traditional knowledge, but also the fact that, of course, it should be used and accessed only with the free, prior, and informed consent of those traditional knowledge holders. There was quite a bit of discussion on avoiding the marginalization of traditional users, and avoiding the unfair use and the unfair distribution of benefits derived from the use of ocean resources. There was points raised on the need to facilitate improved coordination and communication among various actors to build an improved understanding among differing objectives for the marine environment, and also the need to engage a range of voices in, of course, conservation and sustainable use, but also in deliberations under the CBD and other international processes that lay out objectives and goals and targets. And in particular, posts raise the importance of engaging voices from fishers, both small scale and industrial, as well as other economic sectors, and both actors in those sectors as well as authorities that deal with and regulate those sectors. There was also discussion on the importance of empowering the use of women's knowledge and empowering their inputs to conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. Now, moving on to thread 1, and as Sikio mentioned earlier, we were not we did not have a mandate to work on text, so we were not going back and forth with text-based negotiations, as this was not the mandate for the forum, but nonetheless to hear the views of participants on the issues that were addressed in these relevant paragraphs. Now, we heard very strongly the importance of grounding decision-making in sound science, also acknowledging the importance of traditional knowledge and other competent organizations. And again, just to remind people on this webinar that these issues are addressed in these relevant paragraphs. So I think it's the first or second preambular paragraph deals with grounding in sound science. So the intention here was to hear the views of participants on the paragraphs that were currently contained, or new paragraphs that wish to be brought in. Second, there was the importance of strengthening the cooperation mechanisms to generate, mobilize, standardize, and publish biodiversity data. The need to recognize the role of global and regional organizations, both for their important role in implementation, as well as the extremely valuable role that other organizations would play in monitoring and reporting on progress with respect to the post-2020 framework. There were posts that highlighted the need to recognize and strengthen increased regional scale collaboration, including in particular through the Sustainable Ocean Initiative global dialogue with regional seas organizations and regional fishery bodies, which we in the Secretariat are pleased to coordinate together with UNEP and FAO. There was also the need to strengthen coordination among an increasing number of legal instruments related to ocean issues. So points were raised that highlight that there is an increasing number of different legal instruments and processes and organizations that deal with ocean issues, but that this does place an increased burden on governments to follow, engage, participate in all of these different processes. And although all of these topics being very important, it is very difficult in many cases for governments to follow all of these different processes. So the need there for coordination across these processes to avoid duplication. There was a lot of discussion on the importance of the precautionary approach and the ecosystem approach based on, in particular, based on practice and experience. Thread number 2, dealing with marine and coastal biodiversity in the post-2020 framework and implications for the program of work. So of course, many posts emphasize the essential importance of marine and coastal biodiversity in the post-2020 framework and the need to ensure that the goals, targets, and indicators of the framework adequately capture important marine issues. And a few posts highlighted the need to refer and integrate marine issues into the framework on the basis of some of the findings from recent science assessments, including from the IPBES assessment and from recent reports under the IPCC. Participants highlighted that the post-2020 framework should set at least the same, if not higher, ambition than the Aichi targets and align with other relevant frameworks, especially the SDGs. Participants highlighted the value of the 2019 thematic workshop on marine and coastal biodiversity for the post-2020 framework. So back in 2019, we in the Secretariat convened this thematic workshop to provide elements in particular on marine and coastal biodiversity as input to the post-2020 process. And this was useful in doing just that and providing inputs to the process. And the post-2020 co-chairs found this meeting and the outputs very useful. But it also has a lot of really relevant information, not only for the development of the framework, but for the implementation of the framework. So a number of posts recognize that this report should be a useful reference point moving forward, even though it happened quite a few years ago. The importance of seeking alignments with the objectives and mandates of different agreements and conventions in implementing the framework. So here it was seen that it was highlighted that the importance of engaging other entities that have a clear mandate and relevant work to implement the things that are being discussed in the post-2020 framework. Now, in the same thread, there was a lot of discussion on the programs of work of the convention. So many of you may know that the thematic work under the convention, and we have a number of different areas, not only marine, but also on island biodiversity, on mountain biodiversity, on forests, forest biodiversity. These are all organized in the context of what's called programs of work. Now, these have been in the past periodically updated, and in the SBSTTA recommendation and in the COP decision, the COP will have before it the possibility of revisiting the programs of work on marine and coastal biodiversity and island biodiversity in the context of the post-2020 framework. So there were questions raised as to whether the review of these two specific programs of work should be a part of a broader review of how the CBD Secretariat will support implementation of the post-2020 framework. A number of posts highlighted that this should be based on a collection of views provided directly by parties and other governments and relevant stakeholders, and that those should be views based not only on the current the current program of work, relevant updates that may be needed in the context of the post-2020 framework, but also a strategic review of new and emerging issues that also need to be addressed, but perhaps haven't been dealt with so fully by work under the convention so far. There was a lot of there was a few posts on the need to build capacity for decision makers, in particular, noting the needs for capacity for decision making capacity in the presence of significant knowledge gaps, which many of our parties deal with. There was some posts on the importance of inland fisheries work and the need to ensure that the focus on inland fisheries is not lost in CBD world, as this represents a really important issue where more information was needed, in particular regarding biodiversity related issues. Of course, where that work sits and under which program of work it would actually function is another decision, but nonetheless, participants did highlight this important area of inland fisheries. There was also the posts. There were posts that were provided that highlight the need to give special consideration to the issues affecting small island developing states. Now, thread number 3, on implementing the post-2020 framework. There was a post highlighting the need to recognize entities and actors that will play a key role in post-2020 implementation, including various global and regional organizations, indigenous peoples and local communities, various economic sectors, monitoring, observing frameworks. So basically acknowledging and as best we can empowering those actors to play that important role in implementation. There was there was quite a bit of discussion on specific threats, pressures, and issues to specifically reference. And there was a bit of a debate between, the need to highlight and identify specific issues while avoid making a long list or a Christmas tree of issues, as we sometimes call it. So you can see there some of the specific issues that were mentioned in these posts, including marine pollution, plastic litter, IUU fishing, extractive industries, the impacts of extractive industries, habitat loss, invasive species. So all of those were specific thematic issues that were mentioned in the posts. But others provided alternative ways to deal with this list of issues, including by instead referring to all relevant threats and pressures, or focusing on the direct drivers of biodiversity loss as they were identified in the IPBES global assessment. Others highlighted the need for a more strategic approach to identifying the key issues of interest, and that was similar to a post that was made with respect to the programs of work in the context of the post-2020 framework. There was quite a bit of discussion on a new area-based conservation target, and again, targets the post-2020 targets are being negotiated in a separate process. So this was not the mandate of SBSTTA or of this forum to negotiate on language for the targets, but nonetheless, parties did highlight the importance of a new target on area-based conservation, in particular, many noting their support for the proposed 30% target. Others, however, also highlighted that it's important to also highlight the principles or elements of effective area-based conservation, including ecological representativity, protection of areas of high biodiversity value, and effective management. Other posts also highlighted that good management needs to be done using a systems of different tools, and that area-based conservation is an important tool, but is only one tool among many others that need to be used, and that management measures need to be tailored to the status, pressures, and threats in particular areas, and particular areas depending on what issues they're dealing with and what the objectives are for those areas. There was post highlighting the need for implementation to take place in the context of national circumstances, recalling common but differentiated responsibilities. And there was a post highlighting the need to strengthen synergies with the UNFCCC, in particular referencing the Glasgow Climate Pact, and focusing on issues around nature-based solutions. Some participants also, however, felt that wish to avoid the use of the term nature-based solutions, as this is still under discussion, And others also highlighted that a definition for nature-based solutions was recently provided and agreed upon under the UN Environment Assembly, but that in the context of the post-2020 framework, there was still some uneasiness of parties for including specific references to nature-based solutions, at least at the moment. Now, thread number four, plastics, marine spatial planning, and deep sea mining. There were posts highlighting the importance of technology transfer, capacity building, and partnership development, in particular for marine spatial planning and to support the use of marine spatial planning. There were posts highlighting the central role of the productive, extractive, and economic sectors in biodiversity mainstreaming. There was quite a bit of discussion on deep sea mining and the need for the precautionary approach in addressing the impacts of deep sea mining. And these include adverse impacts on the marine environment, biodiversity loss, degradation of marine ecosystem resilience, and impacts on ecological integrity of deep sea and open ocean ecosystems. Some participants highlighted the importance of addressing cumulative impacts of different activities and the need for all ocean uses to apply the precautionary approach and ecosystem approaches. There was a proposal to include a bit more text, strengthened text or new text on the need for governments and stakeholders to address the impacts of anthropogenic underwater noise. There was also quite a bit of discussion on the importance of supporting the development of a new treaty on plastic pollution, which the deliberations of which will be have commenced under the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee in line with the recent UNEA resolution. And in this context, some posts highlighted the need to in particular focus on the issue of abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear. Now, moving on to the final thread, this focused on mainstreaming capacity building partnerships and synergies. In this thread, there was quite a bit of discussion on OECMs, or other effective area-based conservation measures. There was a number of posts highlighted the need for a synthesis of information on the experiences and implementation of OECMs, including on their effectiveness. On this issue, a number of posts highlighted the importance of including in the use of OECMs and development and use of OECMs, including IPLCs, women, small-scale fishers, and other rights holders, and the need to ensure support for indigenous community conserved areas, marine managed areas, locally managed areas, and other types of fisheries, community-based and shared governance approaches. Participants highlighted the importance of synergies with the UNFCCC, in particular with regards to nature-based solutions, MPAs, OECMs, in the context of climate change and biodiversity loss, and of course, other participants again noted their hesitance to use the term nature-based solutions at the moment. There was the discussion on the need for further guidance on OECMs, and guidance that is developed in collaboration with users and all relevant stakeholders, focusing on transparency and how those guidelines are developed, as well as seeking to ensure policy coherence across those different forms of guidance to avoid situations of conflicting guidance. There was differing views as to whether it was appropriate to include text on synergies with the implementation of the future instrument for marine biodiversity in ABNJ. So as many of you know, there's under the UN process in New York, they're developing a new instrument for marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. And there is draft text in the annex to the substantive recommendation that calls for collaboration in the implementation of the instrument, but some posts were questioning whether it was appropriate to do that yet, as the treaty is still under negotiation. There was a need for a focus on best practices in the context of capacity building and best practices and as well as capacity building for small scale fishing and hold on, my camera's in the way here. And the protection of local value chains and local markets, and strengthening collaboration with existing mechanisms of capacity building. So that brings us to the ends of the summary of the threads. And hold on. So basically now the report has been posted on the meeting webpage. It's also been posted as an information document for the fourth meeting of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 framework. And our esteemed SBSTTA chair, Hesikio, will be providing an update to the meeting plenary that will an update on a number of different areas of the intersessional work between SBSTTA and COP, including this forum. And it will also be provided as an information document for CBD COP 15, as it is intended to advance discussions to support the COP deliberations. Now, as you will recall, there were two papers on which we were unable to have a full discussion at SBSTTA, and the other one of those being on ecologically or biologically significant marine areas. We will be convening, therefore, another forum to address the EBSA issue. It's expected to take the same approach as this forum, tentatively planned for late July, but we have to pin those dates, the exact dates down. Nominations will be requested just as they were for this forum, and the report of the forum will also be provided to COP 15. So that brings us to the end, and I will unshare my slides, which I think they've been unshared. Yes. So before I open for any questions, I will ask our esteemed SBSTTA chair if he has anything he'd wish to add. Hesikio, is there anything that you want to add to the summary, if in case I neglected to mention anything? Oh, we can't hear you, Hesikio.
No, thank you very much, Joseph. I think you made a very clear and detailed explanation of the rich discussions of the group, and pointing out the report that is available for delegates to take a look. I think it's important because it has a twofold goal. One is to provide elements for discussions and the adoption of the decision of the Conference of the Parties on Marine Issues, of course, still pending matters related to EBSAs. But this information and the elements in, as I said before, on thread number 3 has a direct connection with negotiations this week in Nairobi to include considerations while dealing with different goals and targets that are related to marine issues, in particular conservation and sustainable use. I hope these documents and this presentation is useful to have it as a good reference during negotiations. But thank you very much. I think your presentation was very much detailed, and thank you for your support. Bye.
Great, thank you. So we still have a bit of time, and in this regard, I will open if anyone has any questions. We have the raise hand button, which is accessible under the reactions tab. So if anybody would like to ask any questions about the forum, about the issues that were discussed or the outcomes, please feel free to raise your hand now. Or if you can't find the raise hand button, which we had last time, you can just unmute perhaps turn your camera on, and so we can see that you wish to speak, and that can be your way of raising your hand. So I'm not seeing any cameras or hands. I see a few names that I know are in Nairobi, so perhaps you're in the middle of another meeting. I hope you're able to have have good discussions in Nairobi in preparation for this week. So if we don't have any specific questions or points that anyone wishes to raise, then that would bring us to the end of the forum. Again, our co-facilitators send their regrets. They're unable to join this session. But all of their guiding points and questions are available to review again also in the recording of the opening webinar and the closing webinar. So I also thought that my signaling that it's the end might trigger some hands going up, but it has not. So maybe I was so clear that it's not necessary. And I think now we should just wrap up. And again, the report's available online. Oh, okay, there goes a hand. I knew that was going to happen. So that's great. So I see a hand from Julian Jackson, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question, and maybe you explained it and I missed it. The text in the annexes, will that go forward through to discussions this week, or do we just have the info documents? So I'm saying the input into the discussion forum, that text, to me that's all still relevant and in play. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And happy to.
Sure. So the annex of the SBSTTA recommendation was the basis for the discussions of the forum. Now we have to keep in mind that this was a SBSTTA related process, and what's happening this week in Nairobi is not a part of SBSTTA. It's a separate process. So the meeting this week in Nairobi will not be formally considering the results of this forum, as that will go directly to COP. Nonetheless, the issues that are addressed in the draft recommendations, or in the annex to the recommendations, the issues that are addressed in the forum threads are highly relevant to the discussions this week. So the discussions of the open-ended working group will not be formally considering any of these issues. Will not be formally considering the SBSTTA outputs or the outputs of the forum, but they will be, that we feel that they will find it useful to refer to these discussions and the issues that are being addressed in the SBSTTA recommendation in the context of their deliberations. Although, in terms of the formal process, this work will go directly to COP15. So I hope that clarifies. And unless we have any other hands, then I think we can wrap up. And yes, so just to say, I see. Thank you so much for joining this this information webinar. I hope it was useful to give you an overview of what happened in that forum. I see we have another hand from CBCGDF. I don't know who that is, but please go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, we just have a question about the COP15. Please, if it is changed from China to Canada.
Well, we don't have any information on that. This is an issue that's basically the all of these issues are still under discussion by the COP by the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties. So we at the moment aren't able to provide any further information on that. But we do expect that that news regarding the location and the dates of COP will be coming soon. But we can't provide any more information at the moment. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. And another hand from Kitma. I hope I pronounced that right. Please go ahead.
Yes, yeah. I'm Kitma from Sudan. I just want to thank you for this reflection. And really, this forum makes things very clear for people to discuss on the recommendation on marine and recommendation number 9 for SBSTTA 24. And it guides the people how to discuss and how to reach for consensus on this very important issue on marine and coastal. And I would like to also to continue the forum for the second on IPSAS. I mean, this also will facilitate the thing. Thank you very much for clearance and clarification on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind words. It always helps to know that this is helpful. We certainly hope it is. So that's nice to hear that these forums are indeed helpful, and we appreciate your support. So I think now that we're coming towards the end, we can wrap up now. Of course, the CBD Secretariat is always here to answer any questions or clarifications that any may have. And we also encourage you to look at the report of the forum itself to get more information. So with that, I think, Hesikio, we can, if you have perhaps any other closing sentiments, we can wrap up.
Yes, we can wrap up. Thank you very much to all. I hope this information is useful. Please take it next to you and share with your colleagues in your delegations as a resource for considerations while negotiating goals and targets. And we look forward to see the outcomes. And as soon as we have more details on new dates and venue for the COP, we will organize the next forum for EPSAS accordingly. Meanwhile, I wish you all the best for these negotiations in Nairobi to have a good, sound, precise, useful global biodiversity framework to be adopted by the COP. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we will close the forum now. So thanks for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.